Hey there, quick note before we dive in. What you're watching right now is a lesson from one of my courses that I've decided to release completely for free here on YouTube so you don't have to pay a dime. So instead of asking you to buy my course, if you want to show your appreciation, here's a couple of things that you can do. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to my channel. These small actions tell YouTube to share my content with more people, which is a huge help. Also, feel free to check out my recommended equipment links in the description below. If you do purchase equipment from these links, I do get a small commission at no extra cost to you whatsoever. Or if you want to, you can leave me a super thanks or even just hit play on one of my playlists. I know it sounds silly, but if you just hit play on one of my playlists and let it play in the background, even if you're not paying attention, it tells YouTube, hey, people are watching these videos. I'm going to push it out to more people. So even if you just want to do that, I would love it. I would appreciate it so much. And then lastly, if you're looking for more personalized help, I do offer private coaching that you can find in the description of this video. Either way, I really appreciate you, whether you choose to do one of these things or not. Just by simply watching this video, it means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Now, let's get to the lesson. All right, so now you have a better understanding of what EQ is and what it can do. So let's cover the parameters of the EQ so we can begin shaping our voice. The first thing I want you to notice within the EQ is the frequency display window. This area gives you a visual of what's happening within the various frequencies of your voice. Remember what we already learned. From left to right represents the bass, mids, and treble. Now, I want you to focus on the yellow line running down the middle of the frequency display window. When this yellow line is flat, the audio is not being affected in any way because we haven't made any adjustments to the EQ. Next, I want you to focus on the frequency ruler directly below the frequency display window. This ruler will give you a rough idea of where you might want to make some adjustments to your frequencies. Now look over to the left and you'll see the amplitude ruler. This will give you a rough idea of how much you're boosting or cutting frequencies when you make adjustments with the EQ. Now let's jump back and focus on the frequency ruler for a moment. Most parametric EQs only show from 20 Hz to 20,000 kHz, while TDR Nova reads from 10 to 40. We're just going to ignore that extra real estate because humans can't even hear that low or high. So let's move on just talking about 20 Hz to 20,000 kHz rather than 10 to 40 because that's what you'll see most of the time anyway. Now, we'll dive deeper into this later, but one quick example of why you have these numbers down here is to help you identify where problems might live within your audio. Let's take 500 Hz for example. This is known to be a really boxy sounding frequency. And this boxy sound usually occurs when someone has neglected to properly acoustically treat their space. Now, while you'll almost always want to fix these types of problems physically, as in properly acoustically treating your space, you can actually use EQ to help hide some of these types of problems. For example, I have this audio here that has a bit of boxiness to it. Once you get really good at ear training and working with EQ, you can just hear audio and know where the problem lives. So, I'd hear this audio, for example, and I'd think to myself, that sounds like there's some boxiness around 500 Hz. I'd take my point to 500 Hz and slightly take the boxiness out of the audio. Now, keep in mind when doing something like this that you're just applying a band-aid to the audio. The problem will still be there, it's just less noticeable. The only way to really fix this problem is by physically properly treating your recording space. All right, well, how much do I take away or turn down? Most of the time, you'll want to do this by ear, as in, does it sound good or not? But there's also this amplitude ruler over here to the left to give you a rough idea of how much you're turning up or down those frequencies. This is a little like the meter in your DAW, but rather than turning up and down the overall volume of your audio, you're only turning up and down those specific frequencies within your audio and within that EQ point. All right. Now let's break down all of these knobs within the EQ and what they do. In the upper right, you'll see these options. Set yours to out so you can see the frequencies of your voice displayed inside Nova when the audio is played back. By default, it's set to off, and that means you won't be able to see the frequencies of your audio that are represented in blue that you can see right now. On the bottom right of the EQ, you'll see EQ gain. I always turn this function off. This is a function that's trying to compensate for the loss or addition of volume when adjusting frequencies in the EQ. In English, just turn this off. We want to hear the changes we're making with the EQ rather than trying to compensate for those changes. The HP and LP buttons stand for high pass and low pass. As you saw earlier in the EQ section, we can use these bands to cut all of the low-end or high-end frequencies out of the audio. Now, try not to let the name of these bands confuse you, though I totally understand if they do. When adjusting the HP or high pass band, at first glance you'd probably think that you were affecting the high frequencies. However, the name high pass means you're allowing the high frequencies to pass through while cutting out the low frequencies, and vice versa for the low pass filter. All right, these points allow you to make various adjustments to your voice within the various frequencies of the equalizer. TDR gives you 4 points to work with, not including the high pass and low pass filter. So in the last example, we used a band to take away some of that boxiness in the audio. Now, as you can see, I can click this point and move it around wherever I'd like, but the next few parameters will give us pinpoint accuracy when moving these points or bands around. Let's start with gain. This determines how much you will increase or decrease the volume of any given frequency. So, like with our last example, I can increase the gain to turn the boxiness up and make it stand out more, or I can use the gain to turn the boxiness down so it's less noticeable. Now, let's move on to frequency. This determines where on the display your control point will be while you make adjustments. So if I heard some boxiness that I thought was coming from around 500 Hz, I would adjust the frequency knob until my point arrives there. Or you could just type in the number below. Now, on to Q width. This determines how much you will include or eliminate frequencies within our target area. The Q narrows as the number goes up, and it widens as the number goes down. Let's take this really annoying high-pitch frequency, for example. If I wanted to make that frequency less noticeable, I wouldn't want to have the Q super wide because it would be including frequencies outside of that annoying sound that I wouldn't want to affect. So in order to deal with this annoying frequency, I'd want to narrow the Q as much as possible to only affect or eliminate that particular sound.